what you gonna do tonight? I've got my mama's car keys and you've got a ticket to ride.
Hello, and welcome to Your Favorite Flick, a podcast where each episode we celebrate a movie that my guest loves. We aren't here to be critics, we're here to be fans. Today, JB Raasch is with us to talk about Brotherhood of the Wolf, an action, a horror, a period. Well, I don't know what the hell to call it, but we'll get into that. JB is a real Renaissance man, which is perfect for a movie that wears a number of different hats and wears them well. Let's have a howling good time. I'm sorry, I had to. Welcome to the show.
Brad, how you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Oh, no problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, JB, before we get into the movie, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got into movies. You and I are both of an age that we hit sort of a beautiful time, I think, to be in college right as indie movies were really becoming more accessible in those spaces than they maybe had been a generation before.
And there was in Louisville, after I kind of moved off campus, there was still an old single screen theater that we would often go to see odd movies or, indie films. I remember seeing Bound there and also Rocky Horror Picture Show and Holy Grail and the other classics that would not screen at another theater. So that was fun.
Worth sharing with the audience that JB and I are friends really through a weekly Dungeons and Dragons game. You're our third guest now from that game. Why Brotherhood of the Wolf, JB?
I don't really know. It's such an odd film in terms of its mashing together of everything. I love the action. I like the fantasy aspect of it. I like the kung fu. I like the Vatican Spy. I like Monica Bellucci. I like Monica Bellucci's boobs. I mean, it's kind of got everything. I saw it in the theater when it was released in French with subtitles, and because I do not understand a word of French. And it just grabbed me. It was just a good movie. It was entertaining, but not like a comedy. It's not a comedy in any way, and that's usually my kind of movie. It took itself seriously, but it executed well enough so that it could take itself seriously and not be ridiculous. It's different in a lot of respects from a lot of the movies you've discussed already on here because it is not a classic. It is not a fine film. This is a good movie, not a fine film. This is not heights of cinema. And it stuck with me. And it's a good movie.
Well, I will tell you, I named the show Your Favorite Flick for a reason. And obviously there's a little bit of alliterative aspect, but this is a great flick. Like
it really is.
It works. And you kind of got ahead of me on this one, which is great. But my next question I had up was, if you're trying to sell somebody on seeing this movie, what the hell genre do you even describe it as?
I don't know that you can. There's the framing story of the memoirs set during the French Revolution. And then you get back to it's essentially a French folk tale. It's a French fairy tale, like a Brothers Grimm sort of thing, a scary tale. It's somewhat inspired by some real life deaths in France from animals. So you've got that aspect of it too, where it's like, well, wait, this is sort of loosely based on a real thing. That's interesting. And well, that kung fu's not real, not by that Native American guy, but that's cool. It's just an odd mashup of stuff that just really kind of worked. I really been thinking about it, and I think that's really just it. It just kind of hits all the notes and somehow doesn't sound cacophonic.
And I appreciate you bringing up the idea of it being serious, because this movie kind of wears its heart on its sleeve in a way that is very dangerous. Because if you miss with something that is in some ways at least genre fair, if you wear your heart on your sleeve and you miss, boy, you often miss badly.
Yeah, you turn into a laughing stock. And everything when I first saw this, I was like, man, nobody's gonna like this. I am gonna mention this in the future, and nobody's gonna have any idea what the hell I'm talking about. You get to the point where it just worked. If it did not hit on all cylinders. It's an object of mockery is what it becomes. And it does not do that. It manages to stay right out of that. And I don't mean to say it that way. It does its job well. It does everything right and manages to totally avoid any sort of mockery. There's really no mockability to it because it's got its heart on its sleeves. It knows what it wants to be and it does it and it is and it executes well.
It absolutely does. I mean, if I wanted to be incredibly picky, the CGI effects, are maybe
Right.
not the world's greatest at this point, but that's holding time against it.
Yeah,
That's
that
not
was
entirely
24
fair.
years ago.
Right.
And they didn't lean entirely on CGI. I was reading that the creature was created by Jim Henson's workshop. So,
I've watched this twice in the lead up to this episode, which I'm so glad you gave me an excuse to watch this movie twice. I hadn't seen it in years, and especially because it's in French, I wanted to watch it once without taking notes. And on this second viewing, I just had the credits on, can't claim I spent a ton of attention, looked up and was like, "Oh, Henson, cool."
yeah,
And
yeah,
they really take advantage of that puppeted aspect of the creature for
yes.
sure.
I grew up Star Wars, first movie in the theater. I would watch and read anything I could about Star Wars. But one of my favorite books about Star Wars was this little book I had that discussed the special effects. And of course, they were all practical effects, including the big explosion of the Death Star at the end and how they did that. And practical effects, even when they look a little bit dated, never look bad. CGI effects, if they're a little bit dated, they start to look really bad. And so you got to give it to the practical guys. I think they know what they're doing, and I think they really need to just keep doing what they're doing and not listen to the people that are saying, well, you can do this better and cheaper if you just do it later and we'll fix it in post. No, let's do it right now. Let's get it right now. It'll be better in the long run.
This movie has a lot of plot, so I don't want to try to get into all of it, but can you do a quick setup for us of maybe kind of give people what's going on in the first act of this movie, at least, so they have a little context?
So I'll leave out the framing story because that's of interest, but not necessarily pertinent to the plot. Basically, there have been some attacks by what some people are saying is a giant wolf, others is just a beast, and the king is afraid that this will cause panic. So he sends his naturalist to this remote province to basically find it. And once found, once it's hunted and killed, to mount it so that it can be brought back to Paris and shown to the country that the king is actually taking care of them. The naturalist gets there and eventually sorts to overcome the resistance of the local nobility and ingratiates himself, and they can't catch this beast. So the king sends his master of arms to basically manufacture a beast that the main character Fransac is told to make into the beast and then forget about everything. But he can't, and he goes back and he does track it down. And it turns out it's a conspiracy to overthrow the monarchy by the local priest, who the Vatican spy has been sent to take out because the Pope has decided he's gone crazy.
It wouldn't be an 18th century French movie if the Pope didn't get involved somewhere along the way, right?
Right. Yeah. And it helps that the Vatican spy is a very attractive woman.
That it does, that it does. And speaking of aesthetics, this movie, I would say, is at least as much about its style as it is about its story. And
Oh,
that is no
100%.
backhanded compliment.
No, no, no. It is very good at it. When I was starting to read a little bit about this before here, because I wanted to make sure I had all my thoughts straight, started reading Wikipedia and all. And they talk about it as a or period romance or a costume movie. And I'm like, I don't think it's really that. They get the costumes right. The peasants are wearing rags and there are certainly the fancy dress of the nobility, but it's not like a Bridgerton where the costumes are the main focus and a big visual draw. That's not the point of this. The style is gritty. The style is mud farmer getting chewed up by a black beast. It works. It fits with it.
I wonder if you're telling on yourself in terms of your viewpoint a little bit there, because I could see somebody watching this, me to a degree, even like one of the things that kind of blows me away here is the opulence of it. And the fact that this movie looks expensive as all hell.
Oh,
I
sure,
look like,
yes.
the budget I think was around 30 million US, substantial for the time. But between the costumes and the locations, not even getting into the creature effects and everything else, it is such a fully realized world.
I think you're saying it better than I did in
I
that
generally do.
well, they're not focused solely on the costume and the romance. That is there, but it's not like if you watch a show like Bridgerton, it is all of that. There is no mud farmer. And even if there were, the mud farmer found a fancy dress and now she's at the ball. Um,
Right.
there is not there is not the sole focus on that. It does run the gamut from the Romani with epilepsy all the way up to the nobles and the court of the king.
And I think it's playing with those contrasts gives this movie a lot of its juice. I think one of the magic tricks of this movie is it just puts me in that world so quickly. Um,
Yes.
and I'm just not
I think it
questioning anything about it.
I think that the character of Fronsac does a good does a major part of that lift. He is equally at home among the peasants in the mud, but then also dresses up. He shines up real nice to go to those banquets at the count's house, at the count's chateau. He is that guy that's in the middle that can live in all those worlds. I think that character is what really gets you in and keeps you going through and carries you through every aspect of it.
He really has that Rudyard Kipling to walk with kings nor lose the common touch quality about him.
Yeah, he does. And we don't get into his background too much. And he is a chevalier, he is a knight, but we don't know what his family background is per se. We know he fought in the Indian Wars in New France, but outside of that, we don't know a lot about his background. We don't know if he came up from the merchant class up into the ranks of nobility or whether his family is noble to start with.
Along with what we're talking about from the lowest to the highest in this movie, it is such a visually bold piece of filmmaking. What
It
are
is.
some of the techniques that really grab you in this?
The one that I notice all the time when I watch this is the extreme slow-mo in spots where you wouldn't necessarily expect there to be slow motion. So I think about the shepherdess who goes into the pit towards the end. This is after quote unquote beast has been caught and after Fronsac has presented his mounted specimen to the king. We see a shepherd girl falling into a pit to try and get one of her lambs. And you hear something, she hears something, and you see her turn. And it just goes slow motion, just as she's like looking around. It kind of like really instills that fear, like when time stops, when you're under extreme duress, like what is going on? What is happening? Holy crap. But then it speeds back up. Normally in a lot of action movies, you see the attack would be in slow motion. No, you never actually see the attack. She just gets pulled down, but she just basically gets pulled down by this thing. You never see the slow motion attack. The slow motion is always just the characters who are just ungodly frightened. It's an interesting take, and it's not one I've really seen in any other film that I can remember.
I tend to look for these things, and especially on a second viewing, but is the number of dissolves where we're going from one shot to another shot, but it's like slowly fading out, or even things like we see troops marching and we see overlapping shots of the same troops marching from three different angles. Some of that's in there, I think, to be intentionally visually disorienting, but also, frankly, I think some of it's in because it's cool, and that's
Yeah.
okay. That works with this movie.
I think so. I think there are plenty of movies that it would not work in. It would seem ridiculous. But in this particular film, it works for some reason.
You gave me some great perspective because one thing I have in my notes, I was just looking back at it, is why does the slow mo work so well here? Because slow mo is often one of those things for me that I'm like, really? Do we need
Yeah.
this in slow motion? But I think it
And it
is the unexpected.
and it's a choppy slow-mo. It's not like a normal, like, just everything slows down. It is like 2 or 3 frames, pause, 2 or 3 frames, pause, 2 or 3 frames, pause. It's not the smooth slow-mo you get from your fancy cell phone cameras these days. It's meant to be jarring. It's meant to call your attention to the fact that this poor girl is about to be brutally murdered, and she knows it, and she's trying to desperately get out of the situation.
I think similarly in the combat, I think part of the reason the slow mo works so well in the combat here compared to other movies is it makes sense in terms of our protagonist. Like we're seeing them actually having that positive stress response of okay, I'm slowing down this chaos going on
Yeah,
around me.
and the fight scenes, they are very well done all through the movie. I've often thought this, and this last time when I sat down and kinda made the notes of it, it's basically increasing badassery through the whole film. It is just sheer acceleration. You start off I mean, the very first scene is well, I guess technically second scene. Second scene, Manny gets off his horse and beats the hell out of some guys with clubs. Doesn't take a single hit, and it goes from there. It just increases. Manny keeps getting more and more badass. And then finally, he is in his full war paint, tracking down this thing with a tomahawk. And it is a woman that does him in the end.
He waits an hour and 20 minutes, maybe more, to pull out the coolest tomahawk we've ever seen in our lives. And you're like, Manny, where was this the whole time?
Exactly. And then poor Manny ends up done in by the woman he saves in the very first scene, which is another interesting callback because if that first scene hadn't happened, we wouldn't have had the movie. If he hadn't saved her and her father, the movie wouldn't happen.
That's one thing I'll say here. A 2.5 hour running time for, boy, I was about to say this kind of movie, but I don't know that I can say that because I don't know what
No,
this kind of movie is. But a two
there
and a
aren't
half
many
hour
like this.
a 2.5 running time of what is, at least in a lot of ways, a genre picture is a lot to ask of an audience. But this movie doesn't waste much of anything. There's
Mm-mm.
not scenes that you feel like, oh, you could trim this. Like both from a
No.
plot and tone standpoint, they're
Yeah.
crucial.
And if you did trim them, you might get a minute or 2 here and there. It would be nothing like, "Okay, we're gonna trim this 4.5-hour epic down to a tight hour and a half." No, there's no room for that. You'd have to basically give up whole plot threads, which I don't think would work.
And I think if we sacrificed any of the kind of quieter conversational parts, it actually would make the action too much for the
Yes,
audience.
I agree. I agree. There's a scene where Marianne is talking to Fransak on the roof of the castle, and she's basically comparing herself and the wolf. Which one is he there for? And without that sort of question, it would just entirely be too much of the badass. And that brings me back to that because that's the thing about Manny is he wasn't the most badass guy in the movie. After Manny dies, Fransak goes ham on him, and he does not let up and just straight up murders them, all of them, until
So
he's
go ahead.
not the most badass person in the movie. It's actually Sylvia, who at the very end pulls out a fan and just slits the throat of the witch as she's trying to run away and do this all over again. No, it is like a quick and the girl's dead. Right before she goes over and stabs the other guy in the heart, or right after she stabs Marianne's brother in the heart. This is the pinnacle of the badassery. It comes in the very last few minutes of the movie, and it's not either one of our main characters.
There's a few incredible weapon things in this movie that will bear more discussion. But something I want to ask you, you mentioned witch there. Is there
I
anything
don't
supernatural going on in this movie or not? I think it's a little bit of an open question.
If there is, it is minimal. It is played up for that, certainly. We have the fact that her father can heal animals very well, quickly even. this beast gets back on its feet pretty quickly after being shot a few times. I would say that we have Manny's powder that in least 2 instances brings people back from the brink of death, and his ability to, if not communicate directly with, at least sort of be empathetic with the wolves. I know that's a Native American trope, and,
Yeah.
I'm probably not supposed to think that's cool, but it's pretty cool. And then
And
we
then,
have oh,
we have the Monica Bellucci character, Sylvia,
with her
who
poison.
with her poison and with her cards, where she does seem to have some knowledge, but
Yeah.
then we find out that she is a spy. So is it really just that she has ears everywhere and she's
Yes.
kind of putting this mystical edge to the knowledge?
She's Italian, an Italian woman, seems fairly high up in the pecking order. Or
And the reason I ask you that is I actually think it's a beautiful example of the way this movie likes to play in gray areas.
yes.
That there is no completely definitive. You could say, "Hey, this movie's
No.
100% realist," and those things are just what characters believe, but not necessarily the truth of the world.
Yes, you're exactly right. There's no overt magic, but there is no definitive disproval thereof either.
No,
So,
certainly not.
it is riding that line, and I think that's probably why it works is because it rides whatever line it's on tightly and doesn't let itself get knocked off or stray too much.
I'm smiling because it's almost a counterintuitive point for a movie that we've already talked about, like pulling in so many different elements.
Yeah,
It
it's
does
almost
manage.
ridiculous, but it's not. It
No,
manages to just toe that line.
and it has a focus to it that lets those things come together that in a lesser movie, which is almost every other movie that tries to do anything similar to this,
Yeah. I was
just
I
doesn't
was
work.
actually yes, yes. And I think that mashing all this together, at first, you're just like, there's a dissonance, like, "Wha how is that supposed to work?" Well, and they don't bother to explain it. There's no, like, "Manny spent time in the East." No, Manny's just a badass.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. He's a badass. Moving on, let him be more of a badass. And I think that that lack of explanation, that lack of concern for, well, how does that work? Doesn't matter. It's working. He brought back lion cubs and put one of them in armor with like mechanized teeth on the outside of it and metal spines. How does that work? Doesn't matter. It's just cool. Let it be
Yes, and
cool.
that for anybody who hasn't watched, that is what the beast ends up being. After being called a wolf, it's the reveal of the creature, which is like a multi-step process throughout the movie, is really terrific. I think we
Yes.
first get a good view of it in the little girl's retelling, the girl who escaped it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and even that's in shadow
that's in
or
shadow,
in
and we know it's her telling the story. Like it's a flashback, so it's essentially a subjective view of it. We don't know
yeah.
for sure yet if it really looks like that.
I think the first real full view you get of it, I may be wrong. I think it's actually when it's walking away after killing the shepherdess in the pit.
I think you're right. And I mean, we're talking about over an hour and a half into the movie at that point, I believe.
More than that. I think and this is what Alien did right, and this is what Jaws did right, and this is what all these movies did right that ended up being constrained by the technical limitations. Well, we can't show the thing because it looks terrible. Let's just show it in flashes. Let's show it in the shadow. Let's show little bits here and there. That works. Constraint makes for a better creative end product.
Oh, yeah. So almost universally, interestingly, here, I think, and I'm not saying there weren't constraints, but I think they may have been self-imposing those constraints to a degree.
Yes, I
Apparently, the
agree.
director talked about Jaws as a direct influence
Yep.
that he saw what worked in these movies. They saw the creative team in general saw what
Yeah.
worked in these movies and said, "We should try something like that."
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you had this shiny toy. You had this fancy toy you wanna show off. Well, just hint at it. Keep pulling the skirt up just a little bit. Show me some ankle, and then we can talk about it later. You just show just a little bit, and it's gonna get you. It's gonna hook you.
And then we get kind of reveal on reveal because when you see it, it looks like it's this horrific hell beast, and you're kind of like, "Oh, okay, well, this is a
Clearly
necromancer who's called
supernatural.
forth this
Yeah.
thing." And then we find out it's in armor. It
Yeah.
doesn't really look like that.
It has metal teeth? What? No, that's not how that works. You talk about the reveal upon the reveal. You have the beast getting revealed, and then you hear the whistle or the panpipe or whatever it is, the tone pipe, and you see the tall guy with the horrible mask leering at the little girl who's still in the cave and then calling the monster back to him. The horribly scarred hand reaching out to pet it. And then finally we figure out where that horribly scarred hand has been the whole movie.
Great misdirect there, because I think by that point, it's hard to
Yeah.
remember back the first time seeing this, but Vincent Cassell just does slimy, slick creep so well that we're assuming he's the bad guy. And then when we see, gotta put bad guy, but
Yeah.
like when we see the big bad for the first time, it's like, oh, well, he has two arms. Can't be him. I must have been wrong.
Right.
And only
Nope.
later do we find out that he's got this horrifying arm pinned to his side the entire time.
With horrible, horrible hygiene. Cut those nails, man.
So you talked some about the action and how the action really escalates over the course of this movie. I would say though there were incredible set pieces kind of throughout. Do you have a favorite set piece in this movie?
I do, and I will get to that. But I don't think action accelerates. It's that the badassery accelerates. The badass increases. You think Manny's it. Nope. Frontzak's it. Nope. Revived Frontzak's it. Nope. Sylvia. She's it. I mean, it's like keeping the pedal down on who's the bigger badass the whole movie. You don't see you certainly think that first scene that this is going to be a just a kick-ass kung fu movie the whole time. Nope. Nope. It turns out it gets better. Not to say there's anything wrong with badass kung fu movies. I love me some badass kung fu movies. I think when they finally decide that they're going to do it Manny's way, and they set the traps, and they are bashing this monster around and hacking at it, and they have a plan B, C, D, E, and F for this thing. And when it finally is just busting through, and they manage to get it, and Manny's tracking it down. That's their. I think that is just pretty tight. Totally ridiculous, off the wall. Those traps would have taken a long time to build, but they managed to do it pretty quickly. How they do that doesn't matter. It was cool
Yeah.
as hell.
As somebody who loves any movie with a Rube Goldberg, those aren't exactly
Oh, yeah.
they're not Rube Goldbergs technically, but like they have that
Right.
feel to them. We don't see the planning of them. We just see that suddenly, like, oh wait, they have another set of bars that drops. That thing's just gonna go right through anyway.
Oh, and a giant spiked log to swing through it and into it. Yes, that's cool as hell. And Manny knew exactly where it was going to be because he hooked it up and he knew to drop to the ground, and that was pretty cool. And that's the thing. Manny and Fronsac are intelligent, well-traveled enough men that they see an old man and a woman getting chased by dudes with clubs. They stop the dudes with clubs and basically act as judge and jury and say, yes, you're going to pay this guy. And then she has a seizure. That's during the fight at the hunt, but she starts to have a seizure. And Fronsac's the only one that treats her with any dignity. Everyone else is, this is a witch. She's a witch. Fronsac knows exactly what to do. Gets her on the ground, puts his knife handle in her mouth so she doesn't bite her tongue off, lets it pass, and then says, we're good. And the father is like, she's not possessed. She's not possessed. I know. I'm taking care of her. Make sure she doesn't bite her tongue or swallow it. He's a decent man. He's basically intelligent, well-traveled, well-read, and seems like a nice guy with a little bit of a cad and a slight bit of a womanizer.
Yeah, but it's a French movie, so he's got one woman he's in love with, and he sleeps with the courtesan. That's
Sure,
for
sure.
French. That's faithful.
She was Italian. It doesn't even count.
So speaking of that, this is a movie that we've mentioned a couple times is really indebted to other movies. Not even necessarily that you have to pick out a movie But are there other kinds of movies or specific movies that you'd really point to and go like, "Oh, this is part of the DNA here"?
I started looking into what movies are similar to this, and every list I read just seemed wrong. I think we are certainly owe that to all of the 70s and 80s kung fu movies, 60s, 70s, and 80s kung fu movies. I mean, that first scene is straight out of a Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan movie. I mean, that is 100% there. We have all of the period dramas that it's, borrowing its trappings from liberally.
And probably worth mentioning, I do not know Chinese cinema very well at all. It is a real failing of mine, but apparently, as much as kung fu movies, it is inspired by, is it wuxu? What's the term for the Chinese sword
Wuxia?
movie?
Is it wuxia?
Wuxia. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know those movies well, but
yeah.
it's something that I read is a major
I
inspiration
can
to the
see
fighting
I can
style.
see that. I have not seen very many, if any of those. I think you have the samurai films that are this is gonna sound terrible that I don't remember the name of this movie, but the one where he ends up selling his services to both sides of the conflict back and forth.
Yojimbo, which we
Yeah.
definitely did not stop and have to look up.
But there is that aspect to it as well. He comes in, he's spending most of his time in the brothel, as near as we can tell, and, just sort of almost not really investing much of his time and or thinking or effort into this problem that he then realize, no, he's solving this. He's taking care of this. He knows what he's doing here. And then, of course, at the end, we have that chainsword fight, that bone chainsword fight against the spinning short swords. That's definitely out of, the probably the wuxia films almost directly, I'd imagine.
Yeah, what an incredible physics-defying weapon that is.
We actually see that sword on mounted in the hunting domain on the wall. So
Oh, interesting.
when he's going into that hunting domain, it is like on a plaque on the wall, like it's a trophy of some sort. And then he opens the coat and there it is, ready to go. It's like, oh, okay. But when I saw it this time when I was watching it, I saw it mounted on the wall. It's like, "Wait, there's that cool weapon that doesn't work at all."
So that actually gets me to something I wanted to be sure we hit. You and I are both gamers. Like I mentioned up top, we know
Mhm.
each other through a weekly D&D game. One criticism this movie got from a number of people when it came out was that it was like a video game. And at that time, early 2000s, that was a
A
real curse
critique.
to put on a movie as a
Yeah.
critic. I see an
I
influence of not only video gaming, but of tabletop gaming as well. And I'm
so
interested. Yeah, go
let
ahead.
me just say before you even ask the question, yes, I have started making notes on a point crawl adventure for this particular plot. A location-based sandbox role-playing game adventure for perhaps levels 5 to 7.
I love it.
I agree with you 100%. And, at 2002, at that time, you did not see necessarily actual plays, I don't think, online. What you would have seen at that point, I think, are session reports in some of the magazines when people would describe what had happened when they went through these particular sessions, or in their war game stuff, they would basically describe what happened in their alternate history retelling of Waterloo or whatever it might have been. So in that regard, it is definitely this guy is dropped in and he's going native, and then he turns out to save the day. But in some ways, I don't see the video game aspect of it. Video games, outside of things like Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption, they're mostly like go here, go here, go here, go here. And that's not what this movie is. This movie is go here and fix it. And he's there for a good long while before it gets fixed. He's investigating. He is wooing. He is drinking. It's not a linear path at all.
I think there's always the risk with that, that those could well be reviews referencing video games by people who don't actually play video games. Eh,
If you
but
think
I
about
think
it from that
it would as
perspective.
it would, as you're doing, make an excellent tabletop role-playing game.
Yeah, I
And
think it really could.
I'm interested, and it's something I thought of while doing it, like, "Okay, could I do this within a D&D system, or do we maybe need to different one?" Besides that being something we're both mildly obsessed with, and maybe mildly
Yep.
is a kind word, um,
Yeah, a little
uh,
weak there.
what is it about this movie that seems like it would translate so well to that, or maybe seems like it even drew inspiration from that?
So we have an area, and one of the things that you talk about in tabletop role-playing games is you can do anything. And like we discussed before, constraints are what make creativity work, make creativity happen. If you can do anything, but that's essentially where you start. You have to constrain it. And so by constraining this to a single region in France, rural, farming countryside, relatively poor, even the count is not necessarily in the higher echelons of nobility, we have our constraint. And that works great when you're talking about a tabletop role playing game is okay, you are here. You are within this region and you have access to these resources. Go.
I'm probably stealing this from somewhere, JB. I couldn't tell you where, but it strikes me that, a sandbox is still a box. Like there still needs to be something there creating the space.
You have to have something. And even if you're soft on the edges, even if somebody is like, well, I want to go climb that mountain and get out of here. All right. Yeah, we can do that. Okay. You freeze to death on the way up. Let's start with your guy that you left back at the end. So you have the region, you have factions, you have the king, you have the crazy priest, you have the pope, you have the local nobility who are not totally in line with what the crazy priest is saying. And you can play those off each other. And then on top of that, you have, even though he's sent by the king, Fronsac and Manny are relatively independent operators. They are the adventurers that came into this region to fix things, or to investigate and profit. They are not here because they necessarily believe in everything that the king wants them to do. They are not here because they are beholden to the pope or related to the duke, or I mean to the count. No, they are here as adventurers. They are adventuring in this region. Uh, we have beasts that are horrid and must be destroyed. We have Templar ruins. What's a good D&D game without ruins? We have, and then we have the cruelest animal of all, man. I mean, really, that's what we end up. So you end up with all of these different things that could be, but it really ends up is just a man who wants power. He's the worst one of all.
We mentioned his backstory a little bit, but much like in a great tabletop role playing game, we get pieces of his backstory and we feel like his backstory is informing the character, but it's not something that we have to spend time in flashbacks going back to his time in New France, or that we need to see Manny with his family as they die. It's there to
Exactly.
inform character and keep us moving.
We don't need to have it fully explained. We get just exactly what we need to basically justify it, not explain it, but to justify it. And that is the line they're riding, and it works. Getting back to that, just real tight on that line that they're riding.
We talked a lot about our lead here. I love Samuel Le Bahan. Is that correct?
Sure.
Uh, close enough. We agree he's a great performance. What are other, and we mentioned Monica Bellucci, who we both love. And I don't know if you noticed this, Monica Bellucci looks a lot like Monica Bellucci, which is a big selling
Mm-hmm.
point for her.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what
And
what
young
are,
Monica Bellucci.
yeah. Any other standout performances here for you?
So Mark Dacascos, he is the chairman on the US version of Iron Chef.
Oh, really?
So seeing that these many years later, he does a really good job in this movie. He also was in one of the sequels to The Crow, which I did not see. He's taciturn enough to keep the mysticism, but also he ends up talking when there's only a couple of them around, and it's like, okay, this is the act. I get it. That's funny. Um,
No,
he's
it's great because running counter to what we expect, he's kind of the most easygoing character in the movie. Like when it's just
100%.
them, like he likes having a laugh.
and appreciates the finer things in life when you see him wander off in the brothel with 2 women. His face is just showing with all the expression that he has exactly what you need to know what he's thinking. Every scene where he's not explicitly saying something, you can read it on his face, and it works really well. Of course.
I have to call out my man Vincent Cassell here. I think I mentioned like just what a great creep he plays. He's got
Yeah.
an insouciance about him, is I guess the way I'd say it, where nothing's quite touching this guy, at least on the surface. Everything is kind of his plaything. But then as the movie goes along, we realize, like, oh, shit's a lot darker with him than even if we suspected him being the bad guy. Things are a
Yeah.
lot darker with him than we expected. I feel we, in fairness, should say for people who, unlike us, prefer men. Vincent Cassell, for my money, one of the best looking guys in the world, and
Oh,
he's
yeah.
he's all oily charisma in this.
He
And
is.
so he has to let it drop. So let me ask JB, what have we missed? What was on your mind that that I
So,
have not asked you about?
one thing about this movie that I think has struck with me is the fact that I saw it in French the first time. The terrible poet who was attempting to court Marianne at the beginning before Fronsac shows up and totally shoots him down. When he is reading his poem at the dinner to the first dinner with Fronsac, in French, it's a way better poem because he's talking about the wolf, but the way he says le loup, and it's a howl at the end, you don't get that in English. And when I first heard that, it was really one of the first times it kind of all clicked, like how languages don't necessarily translate one to one. That was a neat trick in French that you just cannot pull off in English. And when I did listen to it in English and he did try to pull it off, it was terrible. It only works when you're doing it that way. And so it's still a terrible poem. But that little trick was it's like, okay, now my world has expanded. I was somewhat younger when I saw this and still somewhat sheltered, and to be honest, especially in terms of travels and my exposure to the world. So when you start to recognize these things and it just makes you sort of like, "Oh, that's cool. I get it now." So to me, as silly as that little bit is a pretty impactful little scene. Those 2 lines. Again, it's one of those things that just like, how'd that get in there? How did that work in there?
That
Um,
that is as good a like as good a summary as I would be able to make as to why I much prefer subtitling to dubbing.
yeah,
Is I think
exactly.
even if you can't understand the language, hearing the way it was meant to
Yeah,
sound is meaningful.
and this is really one of the first subtitled movies I'd seen where I understood that, because partly because of that little poem, that terrible,
Um,
terrible poem.
our friend Laura is going to come on the show soon. She's Spanish, grew up in Spain, and one thing we're going to talk about a little bit is dubbing versus subtitling. That
Yeah.
the standard was dub movies there at the time, just how that changes your relationship with some films.
You don't think about it because, because you grow up as an American in the center of the movie universe, you don't think about it because all of the movies you're seeing are in English for you, and then you don't think about it, and this is what it really is when you see movies more than once, where you see it once in the original language and then subsequently dubbed, and you're like, "Oh, that's terrible. That voice doesn't match that character at all. Why would you do that? What pick a different person. My god. What do you mean the actor didn't just go and learn Spanish to translate that? No, that's how you have to do it, right? Like, why isn't Mark Hamill voicing Luke Skywalker in Star Wars in Spanish? He should be." Yeah. And then one thing though is you have cultural touchstones that I think you don't get unless you're dubbing. Certain idioms, certain turns of phrase, or even intonations, without dubbing it into the local language, People may not get that.
JB, what are other movies you'd recommend to people who like Brotherhood of the Wolf?
13th Warrior is the one that I think, and even that is loose because it really does not have the same breadth of genre mashing going on that this one does. It really is just more of a period piece with some action in it. But I
But
think
but
that's
I
as
will
close as
say,
it gets.
our friend Eric mentioned not too long ago that he thinks that is like the ultimate D&D movie. That like it feels like a D&D campaign. It's so
I can see
interesting that
that.
you mentioned that one in relation to what we were just talking about of some
Yeah.
of the game elements of this. There were two I thought of that we haven't mentioned yet, I don't think. Bone Tomahawk, which is black and white. It's trippy action, I would say, and it just plays in some similar visual space to this movie, as well as some really cool fights.
I need to see that one because I've seen that recently talked about in other places, and I'm like, "Why did I never see this? This seems like it's been right up my alley. I don't know why I never saw it." So I need to
And
put
then
that one on my list.
the other one for me is Ravenous with Guy Pearce, which takes place during the Mexican-American War. Starts off as kind of a Western war movie and becomes a cannibal horror flick as it runs.
I thought that was a cannibal movie when you're like, and I'm like, "Really? That one?" But that the Western horror, I haven't seen that one either. I need to see that
It,
one too, I think.
it's more of a comedy than this one. It's definitely knowing and kind of a black comedy. There are style similarities and overall conceit similarities with that one. And that I would say check it out if you haven't seen it. JP, thank you so much for joining me today on your first of what I promise will be multiple episodes now that we've gotten you over that hump.
Yep. Now the only difficulty is gonna be finding time where I get to pick the movie at home and watch it in advance of our talk.
All right, we'll make it work.
Thank you very much, Brad.
All right, see you soon. That's it for this one, folks. I'm Brad Glazer. I host, produce, and edit the show. Thanks go out to Chris Bravender, Brad Kaufman, Jeffrey Glazer, and Julia Mott. I saw her drinking a pina colada at Trader Vic's, and her hair was perfect. The music you hear now and at the beginning of the show is by my friend Richard Bates and his band The Huns. That's H-O-N-S. You can find The Huns music on Bandcamp. This Wednesday, we're going to be talking with actor-musician Daniel Sovich about The Dark Knight, one of the best superhero movies ever made, and one Dan has an infectious enthusiasm for. Please follow, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, all the things. Those reviews in particular, no matter how long or short, really help push us up in the algorithms so people can find the show. You can follow us on Instagram at Your Favorite Flick, on Letterboxd at Favorite Flick, or shoot us an email at yourfavoriteflick@gmail.com. Huns, take us out.
Spent those same days brushing up on poetics. That's 14 times 365 inflection.